The Chancellor is in China, banging the drum for British business. Her critics reckon she should have skipped the trip. She's sticking to her plans, but with the economy on the slide, she's probably getting a warmer reception in Shanghai than she would in Sheffield or Southampton. Ministers are placing a bet on artificial intelligence triggering economic growth. Problem: nobody's yet created a computer that can lay bricks. The pound down, borrowing costs up, growth nil. It's quite a conundrum for the Treasury. So is the government's economic plan already toast? We'll talk markets, China and AI with the Science Secretary, Peter Kyle. The Shadow Chancellor claims Rachel Reeves is missing in action, but have the Tories still got an economic leg to stand on? Mel Stride will be in the studio. Business took the brunt of the budget's tax rises. The head of the British Chambers of Commerce, Siobhan Haviland, will assess how businesses are adjusting and what the return of Donald Trump could mean for the road ahead. And we'll open the 70s time capsule with Lord Owen, Foreign Secretary to the Labour government that ran to the IMF when the economy hit the rocks. Plus, with us throughout the show, the Spectator's political editor, Katy, former Director of Policy to Jeremy Corbyn, Andrew Fisher, and Financial Times columnist Miranda Green. Welcome to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. In 1992, Bill Clinton's campaign manager, James Carville, famously told his troops to focus on one thing. It's the economy, stupid. But just 2 years later, Carville lamented the discovery that there were economic forces before which even the most powerful politicians were helpless. In this case, the bond markets, the people who lend governments the money to fund their campaign promises. I used to think that if there was reincarnation, I wanted to come back as the president or the Pope, he said, and went on, but now I'd like to come back as the bond market. You can intimidate everybody. Rachel Reeves is putting a brave face on the signal that 6 months in, business has fallen out of love with Labour. But no one doubts that the outcome of this week's rise in the government's borrowing costs is likely to be either a fresh round of tax rises or deep cuts in spending on public services. It's yet another lesson for a government, most of whose members have never held ministerial office before. Labour's newbies are having to come to terms with just how limited their powers are. And that's before we even begin to think about Elon Musk, who it seems can make pretty much anyone dance to his tweets. Let's hear first from the government. A little earlier, I spoke to the Science Secretary, Peter Kyle. Peter Kyle, should the City Minister, Tulip Siddiq, stand down until the Prime Minister's ethics advisor clears her of any impropriety?
I think she's done exactly the right thing. She's referred herself. That inquiry needs to go through. I think that that's the appropriate way forward. I'm giving it all the space it needs to do. I'll be listening for the outcome, as the Prime Minister will be.
Well, it's a bit of a contrast, isn't it? Because if this had happened a year ago to a Conservative City Minister, you guys would have been all over it, yelling, resign. Why shouldn't she just stand back while this goes on? One of the things that we now know is that she didn't go on the trip to China, though she should have done as the city minister, because of this furor. She can't do her job properly.
Well, actually, let's look back at what did happen. I remember calling for an investigation into Priti Patel's Home Secretary for allegations of bullying. They had to be dragged to that inquiry. I gave the inquiry space to go through it. The results came out. She was found guilty, and no action happened. I think the right way to go through this is to allow the authorities to investigate. We have given more powers to those authorities to do independent investigations, and you know full well when it comes to Keir Starmer, he will listen to what the authorities say.
So you're assuring me that despite the fact that she couldn't go on an important trip relevant to her job, she can still do the job of City Minister?
Well, we had the Chancellor of the Exchequer going to China and representing Britain
to talk about financial services, which is her gig.
In a really assiduous way, doing a great job representing Britain on the international stage. With Tulip, she has referred herself straight away to this. There is a process underway, and we know full well it will be a functional process, and the outcomes of it will be stuck to by the Prime Minister and this government. A complete contrast to what we've had in the past.
All right, there are some people who think that actually Chancellor should have been here and Tulip Siddiq should have been there, because this week the government's borrowing costs rose to levels not seen for decades. Now, last time Chancellor sat in that chair, she said to me, "We've wiped the slate clean. We don't need to come back for more tax rises." Are you going to hold to that promise?
The spending envelope has been set. Look, I'm running a government department. I'm going to
No, I'm asking about tax rises, not spending.
Well, my job as running a government department is to stick with the spending envelope. Now, Rachel, the Chancellor, has set that spending envelope. It is within the fiscal rules. Those fiscal rules are not going to change. They're not going to be broken. This country will be returned to the financial stability for which Britain is always known until the Conservatives came in and trashed our economy and trashed the rules, and their word could not be taken as in. Now, I don't comment. You know the government doesn't comment on the ins and outs and the ups and downs of
I'm not asking you to comment. I'm just asking you to...
What I will say
I'm just asking you to...
What I will say is I agree with Ed
Chancellor
Conway, who is your economics editor and reporter, who said that what's happening in this country is very in line with what we're seeing in like-minded countries, in particular in the United States.
Listen, so you can throw Ed Conway to me, as much as you like. He's a brilliant guy, but he can't answer the question that I've asked you, which is that when the Chancellor says we wipe the slate clean, we're not coming back for any more tax rises, is that still true?
Well, when the Chancellor speaks, she speaks for government, and my job is to make sure that I put her words into action. So I'm keeping a tight grip on my own department so that we don't have to come back with the additional pressures. Now, look, let's look at what we're doing, Trevor. Over the summer, we got everything out into the open. At the autumn budget, the Chancellor reset our finances, she fixed the foundations, and now I am sitting here on the cusp of announcing an investment programme into our country that is going to get our infrastructure upon which we will build the economy of the future.
I want to come to that.
For the simple reason, we do not accept the vice-lock grip, the cul-de-sac that the previous administration drove us into, where the only choices were on the back of high tax, low growth, was whether you cut or whether you raise taxes.
I know you guys
have to get growth into the economy.
I know you guys want to take us back into the history of the Conservative Party in government and all of that.
Well, we're living
but
still.
Let's just talk about what you are doing. The point is that the Chancellor said that when she spoke here, that she was wrong before the election to say that there wouldn't be more taxes and so on, because she didn't know it all. So actually, you didn't have it all out in the open. After the budget, she came in and she said there will be no more tax rises. Now, the point I'm really trying to get at here is, was it an error when she brought forward the budget to impose the tax rises, to give us the doom and gloom message? Because what's happened since then is that there's been no growth. Inflation is rising very slightly, and business is unimpressed. Was the budget a mistake?
Because of the budget, I am able to sit here today and start the process of unveiling a radical reform of the way our country is structured. We will build the foundations of the digital infrastructure going forward, and into the future, digital infrastructure is going to sit alongside gas and electricity for the importance it has for our country. No, Trevor, listen, it is important because
you'd answer the question I asked.
I am answering the question.
Was the budget, were the tax rises a mistake, as most business organisations are telling you?
If we hadn't had that budget, I could not be sitting here talking about an investment programme that will get our country fit for the future and in the areas where growth is going to come from. We always said we couldn't fix the country in 6 months. After an election, you don't go back to zero. You don't start from a clean sheet. You start from where their predecessors left off. And they left us with a broken economy, public services on their knees, and our international relationships in tatters. And we have fixed the foundations, and now we're building on them.
That's the fourth time you've told me that in this interview.
Well, it's about the fourth time you've asked me this question.
We don't need to return to it. But the point is this. After 6 months of your government, we are at the bottom of the table for growth in G4. And I just want to ask you straightforwardly, because the markets will open in 24 hours. What's your message to the lenders who think that their money is safer in America and Germany and are therefore pushing up our borrowing costs?
You know full well that I would not comment on those sorts of interactions with the market, because the market needs to be independent of government.
Why not? The market's what... Listen,
but
your government
I do
minister...
have a message, and the message is the same for every single person who's listening to that programme. We inherited our finances where we had a massive black hole, we had unfunded spending commitments.
They knew
we have
that.
We have fixed those foundations.
Sorry to interrupt you. You told me this 5 times now.
No, but
and
that
they
is...
know that. They've heard that. And what are you saying to them about now?
What they haven't heard is our investment programme, which I am here talking about for the very first time.
Right.
Nobody has heard about the sovereign AI unit, which will be bringing together the constituent elements that we see in Silicon Valley, which we have in our country, if only they were coordinated, if only they had a champion.
My point is, you're not even going to get a hearing if you don't confront this. Look at the growth rates. The Americans are nearly 1%. Look at where we are, 0% with Italy. Unless you actually confront that, no matter how many promises you make about what you're going to do, that's the reality that the markets are looking at.
But that is the reality we inherited 6 months ago.
No, that's your reality now.
That is the reality we inherited.
No, that's your reality after tax rises.
That is the reality we inherited, and that is the reality we've had for 14 years. Highest tax for 80 years, lowest growth. We've been stuck in that vice. We are trying to break it. Now, yes, the Chancellor raised taxes, but look at where we're investing. The R&D budget for our country up 8.5%. Okay. We now have investment programmes for building 1.5 million homes. We have regulatory reform.
I really do
All of these things are going through in quick fashion. They will hit the economy. They will make sure that we can get investment into the country. We'll create the jobs in construction.
I really do want to get onto the territory that you want to talk about, but we do have to deal with this. Let's go somewhere halfway positive. The Chancellor's in China today. I think she's gone to Shanghai this morning. She's coming back, she says, with £600 million worth of investment over the next 5 years, and that's something that she's very proud of. But let's put that in context. In 1 year, 2023, Indonesia landed 60 times as much Chinese investment, 7 billion. Hungary, 40 times as much as us. Peru, 30 times as much as that 600 million. It's not much to write home about, is it?
It's the start. And we have to start rebuilding the relationship with China in a way that delivers for our economy, but also make sure that it keeps our country safe and resilient. These are difficult issues to manage. I think what we've seen is for the Chancellor to go over there, represent Britain on the world stage, come back with solid commitments for investment, but she's also managed to raise the human rights issues that I think everybody in this country is concerned about. Now, the alternative is this, that we sit here and we don't engage. We don't come back with even £600 million, which would lead to future solid investment into the future. Is the answer that it's not big enough just to do nothing? Because that's what the Tories are saying. They are saying she shouldn't go, we shouldn't have any engagement at all. Well, but it is our fourth biggest trading partner.
We don't have to deploy the Tories here. No, I don't think this says that you shouldn't engage. I'm simply saying that it's not much of a result. We give China access to our markets and our technology. I've read the readout from the meetings that she had. Chinese students populate our universities. We complain about the invasion of Russia, their treatment of Uyghurs, surveillance of students here. They ignore us. It's hard to see what we're getting out of this, 120 million quid a year, in exchange for all the things that they get out of this relationship.
Trevor, that isn't the sum total of the relationship that we have with China. This is in additional investment that has been done just in the last couple of days, and it is the start. We will compete, we will challenge, and we will cooperate where necessary with China. And all of those things that Rachel has done on this trip. And it is the start, and we will come back and build on it in a responsible way that brings to bear the best opportunities of the British economy on the world trading stage,
All right.
but also make sure that our interests are
I'm only hustling you up because I want to get on to your topic, which is AI. You're putting a lot on what you call a revolutionary plan for AI. What's revolutionary about it?
Well, it's revolutionary because it is reconfiguring our economy and getting the foundations right for the future, for which we'll be building on. Over the next couple of days, particularly tomorrow, the Prime Minister is going to launch the AI Action Plan. Today, I'm talking about the sovereign aspects to that. You know, when you look at the incredible success that there is in Silicon Valley about getting innovation and then upscaled onto the national in America and then world stage, with the scale of innovation that's there, that is transforming lives but creating enormous amounts of wealth. All of the constituent elements of that you see in this country, but it's not coming together, adding up to more than some of its parts. And what we find is incredible innovation because we're very, very good at creating new products, services and technologies. But so often, when it gets to a certain size, it has to go to America to get funded. What we want to do is bring those things together and coordinate it with a new unit that it reports directly to myself and the Prime Minister so that we can bring together and make the most of these assets.
You want to turbocharge this new technology. One of the things that we know about all new technologies is that they cost jobs. They may create jobs, but they cost jobs, and there's a transition which can be really painful. What's the implication of this for the jobs market?
There will be disruption caused by AI going forward, but you're right that it will also create a lot of new jobs, and it will also, if it's used wisely, it will make workers' lives in the workplace much more efficient, effective and satisfying, because some of the mundane tasks will be taken care of. Now, it's an important question because I am not someone who thinks that we should just sit back and allow this technology to wash over our economy and pick up the pieces afterwards. I get into government for a reason. We're a Labour government for a purpose, and that is to make sure that everyone from every background uses this technology safely, and safety is baked in from the outset, but we fully explore the potential and we use the power of government to make sure that equity is built in from the outset and that everyone from every background benefits equally.
I want to ask you about this issue of safety, because you say that actually previous governments have been obsessed with the safety at the expense, not your words, but implication, of innovation. If you want to reduce, if you like, the safety regulation of AI, what risks are you planning to expose us to?
I'm not reducing any safety risks. In fact...
Well, you just said they were too obsessed with safety.
But my point is that safety is the first step. With the Tories, it was the only step. You have safety for a purpose, to protect people, to make people feel safe, and when people feel safe, they embrace technology. If you don't get safety right, you don't get what comes afterwards. What I want to do is use safety so that people feel protected and safe, and then able to fully explore all the potential that this new AI revolution is going to present to people. Because
there are going to be costs here, of course, and we're in uncharted waters, but some of the risks are already becoming clear. And one I just want to explore with you is, it's been said that training AI systems demands the equivalent of half of the UK's water supply. How are you going to ensure that we have enough water for the machines and for us?
Because it requires real planning. And when it comes to the energy requirements of AI, tomorrow we'll be talking a lot more about that and some of the solutions to the strategic planning that we need to make as a country in order to fully capture it.
But we've seen the risk of this in California right now, where actually the reservoirs not coming on stream have cost people homes and lives.
But Trevor, there are risks either way. There is a risk if we miss out on this revolution, and AI is going to completely transform our economy and society and our ability to actually fulfil our potential as individuals. All of this. Now, if we miss out on being able to be an actor in this, to be able to seize the opportunities and create this technology domestically, then we will sit by and have to buy it all off the shelf from other countries, mostly from the United States. So we have to get this right. So yes, there are lots of challenges we have to get right. That's why I'm acting now. That's why this plan that you'll see tomorrow and the announcements we'll be making in the coming weeks, They're going to get our country right up there at the forefront. We are the third largest market for AI currently. If we carry on as we are, as we've inherited, we'll be buying everything off the shelf, but not being an actor on the international stage, leading this revolution, creating the wealth here, as well as just buying it all off the shelf from others.
It's quite hard to imagine you talking about this new technology without mentioning two key words, Elon Musk. It's clear this week that Musk has the power to make British politicians stand to attention. Neither the Prime Minister or Home Secretary would have said anything, for example, about child rape gangs had it not been for Musk. Are you comfortable about government by social media?
Well, I'm going to correct you on one thing. We brought in a child safety and welfare bill last week. That
Come on. Prime Minister would not have said anything about this issue had he not been challenged, indeed, by our own Beth Rigby on Monday.
I tell you
and
what,
Yvette Cooper would not have gone to the House and talked about it on Monday night had it not been for Musk.
Let's ground this conversation in the people most affected by it, which is the victims. They didn't want more words, they wanted actions. And last week we saw a bill which implemented page 1 of the J Review, which said that multi-agency working together needed to be addressed because that was one of the key things that had led to the situation not being uncovered in the first place. That was addressed in the bill that we introduced into Parliament last week that was opposed by the Tories.
What?
Now, the victims need action. So let's not focus just on words, because I'll tell you what, in all of the words that I've seen that have been out there in the ether and in the media, so few of it was aimed on the victims and what the victims needed. There's been 7 reports. One of them took £200 million and 7 years to do. Let's get cracking with implementing it, which is what this government is doing.
I would love to talk more about that particular issue, but that isn't actually what I asked you about. I asked you about Elon Musk. Is it true that, as reported, that the Home Office is monitoring Elon Musk's posts for potential extremist content?
Not that I'm aware of.
And that isn't something that you would approve of?
I'm just not aware of it. So my department does not monitor individuals, but it does monitor the internet itself for trends in misinformation and trends in harmful content. And that is, as I say, not focused on individuals. That's not the work that we do, but we do try and monitor the focus of trends on the internet and then adjust accordingly. And look, with all of what we're seeing, we have legislation which protects people. Illegal content on the internet must be taken down. None of the rights and protections and safety features that we have now baked into our online activity are up for negotiation. So let's see what unfolds. None of those things are ever going to be diminished by this government. We want to make sure we move forward with an online experience where people feel safe so they can fully explore all of the potential of online activity these days.
Peter Carl, thank you for your time this morning.
Thanks, Trevor.
Let's see what our panel made of that. We're joined all morning by the Spectator's political editor, Katy Balls, Labour's Director of Policy under Jeremy Corbyn, Andrew Fisher, and columnist at the Financial Times, Miranda Green. Miranda, are you surprised that Tulip Siddiq is still the City Minister this morning?
Well, I am, because it's nearly 10 days since the FT scoop about her flat in North London, gifted to her by someone with links to the ousted regime in Bangladesh. And it's taking a very long time for this story to play out, let's put it that politely, because she's in trouble, not least because her actual brief in government is city regulation, and that is supposed to be in a brief that includes, financial corruption. And the government's push is to crack down, give the regulators teeth. And yet here she is with links to, a property deal that doesn't look appropriate. And of course, we can all remember previous ministerial scandals involving property. Peter Mandelson comes to mind. The issue is, if you have a large financial gift on that scale, are you beholden to people? And would that cloud your professional judgment when you're making government decisions? So it's quite a serious matter. I think she's pretty much doomed. Let's face it, Keir Starmer got rid of Louise Haigh for repeating a phrase that previous ministers had already used about a company P&O, and she was out of the cabinet. So, I think Tulip Siddiq's days are numbered.
He set himself quite a high bar with this Louise Haigh and all the talk about integrity, Katy. And I remember Alistair Campbell saying, if a scandal is in the front pages for 9 days, then that's death. That's the death rattle.
Yeah, so I think that was tested, at least during the Tory government era. And often...
Tested to destruction.
Exactly. And maybe there are lessons in that on sticking to the time limit. I mean, of course, Louise Haigh, what really did it for her was the reports about potential phone fraud convictions, what was out there at the time. But it was clear she wasn't particularly flavour of the month politically. I think with Tulip Sadiq, when Louise Haigh left, lots of people thought, well, to be honest, Keir Starmer's team probably aren't going to be crying into their cornflakes. She was seen as a little bit of an odd one out around the cabinet. Tulip Sadiq is not in such a senior position. She's not cabinet level. But I don't think there's any personal feeling that her politics don't fit. I think instead this is pretty uncomfortable. And of course, Labour will say, oh, we're following due processes, an independent inquiry. Let's wait for that to go. But I think the very fact that she was meant to go to China, could not go, or they decided it wasn't a good idea, shows she's currently not able to perform the main functions of her job. And that does raise questions about how long this whole process can go on. And of course, the FT were there first, but that Sunday Times story today, the Bangladeshi coming out...
There's
saying,
more.
Exactly, and saying we need an apology. It really is upping the pressure, I think.
Andrew, we heard a lot from Labour in opposition about integrity and how this is all going to be different and so... And, when Lou Haigh got the bum's rush, there was a lot of writing about how ruthless Starmer was. Doesn't seem to have extended to this particular case.
No, well, Keir Starmer's been consistently ruthless against people perceived to be more on the left of the party and very lenient with people who are perceived to be more on the right of the party. So perhaps that explains a part of it, really, with Tulip Sadiq. But it does seem to me just bizarre that she's still in her job. I mean, clearly she can't do her job fully at the moment, as Katy said. I completely agree. And she should stand down. I think it's fair enough that, Peter Mandelson stood down in the first Blair government for less, actually, I would say. And I'm no fan of Peter Mandelson, but, he stood down for less from Cabinet. He took a loan from a colleague in Cabinet. That was the thing that was undeclared. This is a £700,000 home she was gifted, allegedly, from a government, or from people connected to a government, that is under investigation for embezzlement at the moment. I mean, she cannot be the minister overseeing corruption or trying to stop corruption in the financial sector and have that role. And clearly she can't, because she's been pulled from this trip. So she has to stand down. It's silly to hold out, I think.
I never thought I'd ask this question, Miranda, but do we think standards are dropping as compared, for example, with the Blair era?
Well, I thought Katy made the key point here, actually, which is that this has been going on for several years now. And the assumptions that we all used to have in politics in the, dim and distant days of the 90s, that there was a scandal and you left, they seem sort of out the window, and it becomes a game of, can we hang on, particularly if it's a political ally or an ally of some sort. And of course, Tulip Sadiq and Keir Starmer have neighbouring constituencies in North London. So I think the rules have changed, actually, or certainly the expectations and conventions about ministers going. Standards have slid, but no, I think it would be unfair to say this government. I think for a while now. I mean, think of Boris Johnson's government. There were constant cries for resignations, and it used to take months and months and months if they ever went.
I suppose what makes it tricky for Keir Starmer, though, is they put such great store in the idea they were going to clean up politics. They talked about this new independent ethics commission. You're going to have an independent advisor who can start their own investigations into ministers. Lots of Tories at the time said, oh, they're going to live to regret that. But actually, we don't have a lot of this stuff set up yet. And I think that, what Keir Starmer said in opposition that he'd do on ethics is right now not completely matching to what he's doing in government. Early days, but they have raised the standard of what we were expecting from them, through their own words.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because Rishi Sunak did the same, right? So when Rishi Sunak got the job, unelected, so not a perfect parallel. On the steps of Downing Street, one of the first things he said was promising integrity. So political leaders know that there's an appetite, and that actually what the public want to demand of their leaders, but it doesn't ever quite get delivered in an impartial way, as Andrew was implying there.
We will no doubt be returning to this over time, but let's talk about the big news of the day, of the week rather, which is the economy. Andrew, Peter Kyle, to my surprise, did not choose to reiterate Rachel Reeves's pledge made here, right in the studio, no more tax rises. I'm not going to come back for any more. What do you think is going to happen here?
I think looking at the state of the economy, and that's partly what they've inherited and partly what's gone on since the election as well, you'd be foolish to rule out more tax rises. I mean, I think they picked the wrong tax rises, by the way, in the budget, but they had to put more money into public services. I mean, if you want to get NHS waiting lists down, if you want to solve the crises in social care, the under-recruitment of teachers, you know, the backlog in the courts, you could go through the system. It needs more money. There's no way round that. And Labour wasn't honest in its manifesto about that. It said it would do, I think, £7 billion worth of tax rises for day-to-day spending over 5 years. And her first budget, she does £40 billion worth of tax rises, which kind of reflects the reality of the situation she inherited. So given, you know, growth forecasts have gone down since the budget, given the cost of borrowing has gone up since the budget, clearly you'd be foolish as a Chancellor to rule out more tax rises. Where they fall is a really politically important thing, but you'd be foolish to rule them out.
Trouble on the horizon, Katy.
Yeah, I mean, I think as soon as Rachel Reeves said after her budget in an interview, don't worry, guys, this was a one-off. I'm not going to do anything like this again. There were several members around the cabinet table and more in the Labour Party more generally who thought, is that such a wise thing to say? Just because you don't know what events are going to come. Now, it could be something like a pandemic. It could be something like bond market jitters. It's just hard to predict. So I think that the backlash from some of these things meant that there was an attempt to reassure, and it's a bit naive.
Well, we will no doubt be talking more about the economy a little later in the programme. But it is now just after 9 o'clock, and you're watching Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. In the last hour, the Science Secretary, Peter Kyle, has said Treasury Minister Tulip Siddiq did the right thing by referring herself for an investigation over corruption allegations and hinted that she could lose her job if found liable. He also confirmed that he's not aware that the Home Office is monitoring Elon Musk's post for extremist content, following reports this week. There's plenty more on the economy in the next hour. In a moment, we'll hear from the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride. We'll then get the business view from the head of the British Chambers of Commerce, Siobhan Haviland. And with some drawing comparisons with the 70s Labour government's own economic turbulence, we'll be joined by Jim Callaghan's Foreign Secretary, Lord David Owen. Right, let's get cracking with the opposition. Earlier, I spoke to the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride. Mel Stride, the Cabinet Minister, Peter Kyle, said to me this morning that Tulip Siddiq has done exactly the right thing in referring herself to the Prime Minister's ethics advisor. Do you think that he's right?
So I think that was inevitable that she would have to do that. But what is not right is that the Prime Minister is not moving her out of that position and getting her to step down, because she is the anti-corruption minister. She has serious charges laid against her now, or serious accusations that around corruption. And it's going to be really impossible for her to do that job under current circumstances. So she should step down, and the Prime Minister needs to get a grip of that.
Is that really fair? What happened to innocent until proven guilty?
Well, there are circumstances, I think, where you are in a situation where you cannot actually do your job effectively. Now, look, the Chancellor has gone over to China, and we may come and talk about that in a moment. Tulip Siddiq, my understanding was that she was due to be joining her. Now, she hasn't, and I would imagine joining the dots, that's because of the circumstances surrounding her at the moment. So at the moment, she's not in a position to be able to properly carry out her role in government, and the Prime Minister needs to get a grip and to move her on.
Right, well, let's talk about that trip to China. You've been saying Rachel Reeves shouldn't have gone. Do you seriously believe that if Rachel Reeves hadn't gone to China, it would have made the slightest bit of difference to the markets?
Well, the markets move fairly quickly, and sentiment and confidence is at the heart of the approach that a good Chancellor should take. Now, if you absent yourself and go halfway around the world when bond yields are rocketing up, particularly in this country, with very serious consequences, then you need to be at your station reassuring those markets. And I'm afraid it's rather tone deaf to not have got that in the first place. Now, Trevor, let me just flesh this out, if I may, just very quickly, because this has real consequences for real people. The fact that we are now paying about £12 billion a year more on servicing our national debt as a result of these market moves has real implications for people up and down the country. And that is money that is just simply going down the drain. It is not there to spend, for example, on our public services.
I want to come to the substance of it, but you're making a big deal of where Rachel Reeves is physically. I don't know if you've heard about this magic. It's called Zoom, phone, email. I mean, it doesn't matter these days where she is. She can take decisions and she can tell the markets whatever she wants to do. Was that really a substantial thing for the opposition to talk about?
Look, where she goes and what she does is about how she communicates to the markets. And what she needs to do is to reassure and show very clearly what her priorities are.
She tried to do it from Shanghai.
No, I'm sorry, a quick clip from halfway around the world, etc., with a different time zone is not the way that you reassure markets. We've seen in a matter of a short number of days now, yields on bonds rocket up, the cost of servicing our national debt go up. That $12 billion could employ 300,000 nurses. It could pay for all our prisons and judges in the UK for a year. Right. It could pay the pensioners who have had their winter fuel payment taken away from them. It could pay that for 8.5 years.
All right.
Okay, that's the size of the problem that she's created, and she should be here to reassure markets.
All right. Well, look, let's talk about the contribution that you might make to a patriotic response to the market. You might have perhaps helped to calm the market by acknowledging that some of this is your party's fault. Nobody has to buy into the $22 billion black hole business to accept that it was Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's budget that first tanked the market.
So you're going back a while now.
Yeah, I had things. It took you
Trevor,
2 years to recover.
Trevor, I had things as the chair of the Treasury Select Committee to say about that particular period. But let's be very clear about the inheritance that this government received from us. We had the fastest growing economy in the G7. We had near record levels of employment. We had near record low levels of unemployment. We had seen real wages growing every month for 13 consecutive months, and we had brought successfully inflation down from its peak at the end of 22 down to bang on target at 2% on the day of the general election. So that was the inheritance.
Just about.
What they have now done is spent and taxed and borrowed to an extent that they have destroyed growth. Growth in our country.
Would it not help to get the international markets on side if they thought that our political establishments, both sides of the aisle, were being a bit sensible about this, and your part would be to acknowledge that mistakes were made?
So, as I say, I had a number of things. I'm on the public record very clearly. At the time of that mini-budget, I was chair of the Treasury Select Committee, and I was very clear on my opinions, and they have not changed. One of the reasons, actually,
but Trevor, no apology,
possibly why I'm sitting here now is that very point, is that my party has almost exclusively, almost, but not always, but almost exclusively been the party of fiscal responsibility. That is in the DNA of Conservatives. We believe in sound money.
Okay.
And I and Kemi and our team are now going to go out over the coming months and years and put beyond all doubt that we are the party of fiscal responsibility. And part of that is challenging this government, who are back to the old days of socialism, where you think you can spend your way into a better world. And we are discovering that you can't.
I know being Shadow Chancellor obviously doesn't mean being able to say you're sorry, but let's just ask about this week's business. Did Liz Truss consult you or Kemi before she sent a legal letter to the Prime Minister calling on him to cease and desist from accusing her of crashing the economy? And to be honest, was it helpful?
So I was certainly not consulted. I can't speak for anybody else. Look, this is a matter for Liz. I can't really comment. I haven't even seen the letter, so I don't know exactly what she said. But, you know, I leave that to her.
OK. Let's talk about China.
Yeah.
Party's not exactly united on your body language. On the balance between principle, focusing on human rights and China's intervention in other parts of the world, and on the other hand, striking a trading relationship which is advantageous to us. Where do you stand? Do you think that this government's getting it right, or are they giving China too much credibility?
Well, they're getting it wrong, and let me explain why. So we know, of course, that China is the world's second largest economy. It's our fourth largest single trading partner, and they're very important to us internationally, where we have to cooperate on things such as climate change, for example. However, we have to be wide-eyed and realistic about this. They are also a competitor in ways that are unsatisfactory, often in the way in which they trade, the theft of intellectual property, their human rights record, their support economically for Russia around Ukraine, the threats to Taiwan and so on. Yeah. And what we therefore have to have is the right balance of approach. Now, what we are absolutely united on is the sight of our Chancellor of the Exchequer scampering off to China, cap in hand, at a time that the UK economy is in significant distress, does not get that balance or that approach right.
Is that this doesn't sound very pragmatic conservatism. That sounds rather ideological.
No, I'm a pragmatist, of course.
That's what I
just
thought.
set it out.
Well,
I've just set it out in those
like
terms. No, I have set it out exactly in those terms. So it's not black or white. You have to have both sides. They are the largest economy, the second largest economy in the world. They're our fourth largest trading partner. They matter to us, but that doesn't mean that you turn a blind eye and at a moment of need in the UK economy scamper off, cap in hand to the Chinese with all the optics that goes around that. I don't think that was the right decision.
You are going to have a test quite soon, aren't you? Sooner or later, President Trump's going to ask us to decide where we stand, because he will almost certainly impose fresh tariffs on China, and he will expect allies to follow. Should we?
Well, that's a hypothetical question. We don't know what.
Well, it's not that hypothetical. He's not stopped banging on about it.
Well, of course, we're not in government. What we need to have is a positive relationship with the Trump regime, something that this government, I have to say, has had a fairly checkered record on.
And the Trump regime interpretation of a positive relationship is you agree with us on China.
And what we do, you mentioned tariffs, what we do on the tariff point is what the government should be doing is forging a good, positive working relationship with the new administration, not falling out with them as they have been to date, and therefore pressing the case for not having these tariffs, because at the end of the day, Trevor, these tariffs are going to lead to higher inflation, higher interest rates, slow down in the world economy. It's not going to be good for anybody. But that is an argument that you have to have a relationship with the administration in order to be able to make. And at the moment, this government is completely failing that test.
Yeah, but you just said that we might not have such a warm relationship with China. It's a bit confusing. But anyway, let's just...
No, I said we need to have a balanced relationship with China.
All right.
A balanced relationship.
Just very quickly on America, in a word, is Peter Mandelson the right person to deliver that relationship?
Well, it's got off to a pretty sticky start. I think I'll probably leave it at that.
OK, Mel Stride, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Trevor.
Let's hop back to our panel quickly. Katy Balls, Andrew Fisher and Miranda Green. Miranda, are the Tories right to complain about Rachel Reeves being in the wrong part of the globe?
I think this is absolutely mad. I mean, they're making hay with it. But what sort of signal would it send to the bond markets if the Chancellor of the Exchequer cancelled a major trade-related trip to a hugely important economy, or indeed flew back in the middle of it, turn the plane around because there's no crisis? It's a disastrous message, and of course she wouldn't have done that, and she shouldn't have. But the problem is that Rachel Reeves' situation on the economy, on how the bond markets are reacting, on how the pound is experiencing a bit of a sell-off at the moment, makes her position very tricky, because we all know what a difficult few months she's got ahead of her in terms of economic management. So she's vulnerable, so they can run with this ridiculous line. I mean, you'd have had headlines saying, crisis, what crisis, if she got off a plane to say, I'm here to calm nerves.
Is there any tactical sense in this, Katy?
I think she was in a no-win situation once the trip was publicly known, because, of course, people can criticise saying, well, look at all these problems in the economy and you're off visiting a country where there's lots of questions about the wisdom of actually securing closer economic ties with China when you should be back here. But as Miranda says, if you cancel it, then all the critics say, well, their point has landed. And I think that there is a question to ask about Labour's pivot towards China. They hate to use the word reset on it. Happy for a reset on Europe. But clearly they want to have closer ties with Beijing because they think it will help with growth and also the clean power mission. Yet, lots of foreign policy experts said, if you want to do that, do your China audit, complete that, and then go to China. Well, the audit's still going, and we've had David Lammy go to China, Rachel Reeves, and Ed Miliband will go next. So I think there's a question as to whether they're even interested in seeing some of the potential cons of securing this closer relations. But to understand why she is there, you just need to look at how the economy is looking right now. Rachel Reeves, to be frank, cannot afford to say no to anything that might bring growth because the situation is in such a tricky place.
Andrew, did your heart leap when Mel Stride accused the government of returning to the old days of socialism? Did that make you feel, I've won?
No, because I look at reality, unlike Mel Stride, evidently. I mean, look, it would be a great thing, and actually most of the public think it would be a great thing. Most of the public wants the water industry in public hands. It wants the energy sector in public hands. And this is Tory voters, not just Labour voters. Reform voters as well, actually, more so than Conservative voters. So, people think there should be more taxes on the very richest as well to help fund public services. And that's something Rachel Reeves might be having to look at, actually, over the next few weeks. So, actually, I think we might have to get more towards that stage. And to be honest, it would be sensible. We're allowing the water companies to rip us off, put our bills up above inflation every year. And what are we getting to show for it? More sewage in our rivers.
Well, I don't think buying out...
Well, you wouldn't have to buy them out. They're about to go bust. You have them for nothing.
No, you do still have to.
You don't. Their share price is virtually nothing, Thames Water. They've got no real value.
There are huge financial obligations with renationalising.
There are, but
utilities. At the moment, there is no money.
We're being hit for it.
Do you think the public really want money diverted from the NHS?
But it's not diverted. Oh, come on. You can't... That's investment versus day-to-day revenue spending. They're not the same thing.
Good luck making that argument to the bond market.
Happily.
Katy, did you detect a certain amount of rapid backpedalling away from the Truss Kwarteng era in what Mel Stride had to say? I don't want to draw too much out of it, but...
Yeah, he didn't want to dwell there. And I also think, when he's saying, we're clearly the party of fiscal responsibility and so forth, but let's just carve out this brief period, which we can still link to some of the issues today. Because, of course, what's been happening in the bond markets this week, some say, is this similar to the Liz Truss situation? But I think ever since the mini-budget, and of course, there are some global trends there too in terms of higher mortgage rates, inflation, but the UK has started to look a bit like the ugly baby, and that takes a long time to recover from. And it does mean that Rachel Reeves faces a really tough task when she's made the decision to borrow more than she suggested, to raise taxes more, and potentially has a credibility problem of her own making on top of the UK's current position.
To be fair to Liz Truss, which is not a phrase you hear very much, let's have a look at the gilt yields chart. And actually, maybe she has something of a case for saying that people are a bit unfair to her.
I don't think so. Look at where it spiked. It spiked upwards in 2022, just after her budget. It's kind of pedalled along slightly at that level ever since. It's not really gone down. So I think she's got no case. Look at where it went up. That big spike is late 2022.
Well, and Katy makes the key point, which is that, unfortunately, with the international money markets and the bond markets and currency markets, once you look a bit vulnerable, then if there's a global sell trend, or nervousness amongst investors, which we're seeing globally at the moment, then you are vulnerable. So this is still actually the shadow of the mini-budget. And I know Liz Truss has got lawyers involved, so I'm going to be careful what I say. But it is kind of hilarious to see Mel Stride trying to say nothing to do with us, Gov,
OK, we can have lots of fun with this. No doubt we'll talk about it more. But stay with us. We'll take stock of the business view for the year ahead with the Director of the British Chambers of Commerce, Siobhan Haviland.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest 'Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out.
The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here. In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Shevaun Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a 4th indictment?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
The dust has now settled on the budget, and the Chancellor insists that she's not for turning on one of its most controversial measures, the hike in employer national insurance. Many businesses are now pricing that in, but the prospect of trade tariffs by President Trump add to the uncertainty in the year ahead. Siobhan Haviland is the Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce, and she joins me now. Morning, Siobhan.
Morning.
You've recently surveyed your members, which are mostly small and medium-sized businesses. How do they think the government's doing?
So our quarterly economic survey came out this week, 5,000 businesses. What did they tell us? They told us that tax was their number one concern, which we haven't seen for quite some years, obviously driven by national insurance increases. And that's really hit confidence. And we measure confidence in forward sales, so less than half thinking that their turnover is going to increase over the next year. And that's not good. And so they're thinking about what they're going to do about it. Are they going to increase prices? Are they going to slow down investment? And slower business investment is bad for growth.
That's actually a fall off from the previous the equivalent quarter last year, isn't it, in terms of confidence?
It is, and it's sort of lowest levels of confidence since 2022. So we really need to turn that around.
What do you reckon that the impact on the economy might be of that lack of confidence, for example, in hiring?
So businesses are telling us they're thinking about 3 areas of mitigating against those tax increases. First is looking at putting up prices. That's going to be difficult in a lot of sectors because there's a lot of price increases due to the inflation of the last couple of years, and businesses don't want to put up their prices. Secondly, they'll take it in the margin. That means less investment in growing your business, which again is not a good thing. And then thirdly, they'll think about slowing down recruitment or perhaps less pay rises for employees next year. So what we need to see, is what we said to the Chancellor this week, is you need to recognise that impact and you need to act on accelerating other things that we've asked for.
Those 2 things, particularly the investment and the hiring, are actually problems for Rachel Reeves's ambition to grow the economy. Now, we've seen last couple of months that growth has been flat. If people aren't hiring, people aren't earning and spending money, and if we aren't investing, you can't see productivity going up. Are we potentially heading for what people are now calling the doom loop towards stagflation, low growth, high inflation?
We need to see really quick action, right? The government have talked about good things we've asked for, industrial strategy coming down the track, trade strategy, infrastructure plan, but probably June. It's January. That's 6 months of vacuum we don't need. So what we've said to the Chancellor is we want to see 3 things. Help businesses on the cost side by speeding up business rates review, which is that's an upfront tax. So that will help investment, that will help the high street. Accelerate infrastructure plans. So if we can get, she talked about this in the budget, if we can get Britain building, if we can sign off big infrastructure projects like Sizewell C or Lower Thames Crossing, that really drives SME supply chains. You really see local economies develop in those areas. And then the third is trade. So EU, still our biggest trading partner. Let's build a relationship there. Let's make it easier for businesses to trade.
Do you think, people are getting very nervous, and the bond markets that everybody's talking about are obviously losing confidence in the idea of the plan and the promises that things will change here. Is there a danger that we are heading back into recession?
No, we don't see recession as an issue. We forecast about 1.3% growth for this year. But we do need to see quick action in those areas that we've talked about. And of course, action is important and that drives confidence. And, the UK economy has some really strong fundamentals. We have a new government with a large majority, a 4-year mandate. And, Trevor, I have the pleasure of travelling the country, meeting the businesses of the UK. And what I can tell you is they are resilient, innovative organisations. Yes, they lay out the challenges as per National Insurance, but then they say to me, but, look at the apprenticeship I've hired, or look at the digitisation I'm putting in, or look at the expansion I'm doing. So, that is confidence, and we need to project that confidence as an economy.
I thought it was very interesting in your survey when I read it that one of the top things that they talked about, and you've just mentioned it, is business rates reform.
Yeah.
Now, government or the Labour Party in opposition talked quite a lot about this, but we haven't seen any prospect of business rate reform, despite the fact that they're now to their sort of 74th, I think, consultation. But that's one thing that hasn't happened. How disappointed are businesses that that's not on the horizon?
So to be fair to this government, it is on the horizon. They have promised that reviewing that reform this year so that a new system will come in April 26.
Okay.
But what we're saying is it can't come a minute too soon.
Get on with it.
Right, exactly, because that's another upfront cost that stops you investing and then focus on the opportunities, the growth opportunities on the other side, infrastructure build, trade.
Okay. You met the Chancellor before she went to China. Do you expect to see any practical outcomes for your members as a result of this trip?
So the trip that the Chancellor's on is what we want to see all our politicians doing, right? Travelling the world, banging the drum for UK PLC. The focus of the trip this time was around financial services, hugely important for the UK, and some sort of climate-type products. So that was the focus this time round. Absolutely drive confidence, which is really important for our members. I mean, trade is the most efficient way to grow GDP. We estimate a 2-point increase in trade can drive something like 0.7% of GDP. That is huge. So it is really important that our politicians are working with all our biggest trading partners around the world.
I don't know if you've read the output. Once you've got past the rather technical paragraphs about the greasy wool protocol and the pet food protocols and so on, do you think that the Chancellor's actually smoothed the way to an expansion of trade in the way that you've talked about?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, relationships take time to build, don't they? So this is a great first step with China, fourth biggest trading partner. We want to see the same with the EU, with the US and so on, but it's absolutely the right way to go.
And what about the US? What impact might Mr. Trump's promised tariffs have on us?
Well, clearly there's a lot of chatter about that, and it doesn't help certainty and stability. But what you've got to remember is that we have very strong trade links with the US. We are not in a trade deficit with the US. And the vast majority of our trade is services, not goods. So tariffs are sort of less impactful for us. And US businesses do tell us that it's important for us to have other strong relationships, like with our partners in the EU. So it's not a zero-sum game, you know. We can find a win-win for everybody.
I love the fact, Siobhan, that you brought a shaft of optimism into the prevailing gloom in our discussion. Genuinely, are you optimistic?
Genuinely, I am. Optimism is a very undervalued leadership quality, in my view, Trevor, and I see it in the business leaders of the UK week in and week out. So that's what makes me feel optimistic.
Shevaun Haviland, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
It is now nearly 50 years since Jim Callaghan's Labour ran to the IMF for a bailout to stave off market panic. We'll look back at a cautionary tale for Rachel Reeves with the Foreign Secretary in that government, Lord Owen.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
It's been a bumpy week for the public finances. Borrowing has become a lot more expensive. Some people have drawn early parallels with 1976, when under Labour, the pound plummeted, borrowing costs soared, and markets were pretty dubious about the government's spending plans. It sparked an historic IMF bailout. The crisis more or less doomed Jim Callaghan's Labour to becoming the most recent single-term Westminster government. David Owen, Lord Owen, became Foreign Secretary in the wake of that bailout, and he joins me now. Good morning.
Morning.
Dennis Healey went to the IMF at the end of 1976, got a chunk of money, 2.3 billion. You were already a senior minister, and you became Foreign Secretary shortly after that. What do you think we learned from that episode?
That basically you have to pay the price if you are indiscriminate in the use of public money. And I was close then to Tony Crossland, and he was opposing this, but there was never any chance of it being successful, his opposition. Of course, in retrospect, you can say some of the economic arguments he was putting forward in the cabinet against doing it were correct. But that's not the reality. The reality is you have breached the confidence of the international financial world, and you have to accept their disciplines. Callaghan knew that. Tony Crossland tried to oppose it, but it was folly. You have to go with the flow. You've basically the same now, but it's nowhere near the same, as you say. I mean, inflation was nearly 4%. We were borrowing the biggest amount of money we'd ever borrowed, the IMF ever gave us. It was actually quite an achievement of Callaghan to get it on those terms.
It's interesting. I mean, Crossland would not have been regarded as a sort of wide-eyed lefty at the time at all. What do you think... Crossland, I beg your pardon, would not have been regarded as a wide-eyed lefty. What do you think drove him to oppose the bailout?
Well, he was a trained economist and a serious economist, and he thought you could take the economic lessons of a university economist and then a practicing economist and a very intelligent man to the world. Well, the world doesn't operate on those rules, and bankers are different from economists for one reason, and also other reasons. Our time is up. The people were fed up with us. We were seen to have flouted the warnings that were coming and ran up this huge deficit, and we were going to have to accept the discipline.
Would it have worried you at that time that, Private Eye, for example, would have written about the gnomes of Zurich, meaning the bankers who were lending, that the government was in some way beholden to non-elected forces? But there's an echo here, of course, of Mr. Elon Musk and his influence on government. Is that something that we should be worried about?
No, we live in a world of international finance, and thank goodness we do have these international institutions like the IMF and like the World Bank, and we have to live within that. We have a voice. Fortunately, Britain is still able to have quite an important role in all those institutions. So we, at civil servant level, senior civil servant level, we are involved in their decisions. But when we send civil servants to those bodies, they are independent, and sometimes the politicians don't like it when they remind them that their responsibility is the organisation they're in, whether it's the IMF or the World Bank.
Looking at the situation now, I know you follow politics still pretty closely. Do you feel that we still have that role, that weight that you would have carried as a Foreign Secretary in the late 70s?
No, we don't have that same weight, but we are still an important voice. And I think we have to take on board the real issue of the world at the moment, which is the ever-increasing rise in the power and influence and military strength of China. That's the issue. And what's interesting about the present controversy that's going with American businessmen in particular, demanding that their government take the threat of China seriously and challenge it and develop strength to be able to cope with it. And I think this is very important, and we better listen to them. And actually, I welcome the fact that serious business figures are taking such an interest in international politics and international finance.
When we say serious business figures, who are we talking about?
I think Elon Musk is a serious business figure. I mean, he ran a very successful car company, Tesla, and he's involved in the highest of technology, space technology, and I think that Trump is quite right to listen to him.
And so you would say that it's not entirely clear what position we should take, but Trump is very aggressive, I suppose, about the threat of China. Do you think that our, as it were, opening to China, Rachel Reeves' visit this weekend, is the right approach to take?
Yes, as long as she's there talking economics, as long as we realise that economics is not the whole or even the most important picture. China is becoming a world military power. It's also becoming a world influence. So how to deal with China becomes a major issue. And I think it's right that we are addressing it at long last, actually. And I think we need to address it in a very serious manner and with friends and allies. And therefore, the more that Britain is involved with this debate that's taking place in America, and the more our businessmen get involved with it, the better. And I think we've got to face up to some tough choices. People talk about Russia. Russia is a lesser power than China now, and becoming, in my view, over the next decade, even weaker. And remember, the Ukraine crisis, Russia went to China to get their acquiescence, and they said, yes, but you're not to use nuclear weapons. We still hear noises off of Russians demanding the use of tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine. But Putin knows perfectly well he doesn't have the support of China if he does such a foolish thing.
You're a long-time Atlanticist, and relations with America important to us. One of the first most controversial things that you did in 1977 was to appoint a man called Peter Jay, journalist actually, son-in-law of Jim Callahan, to the embassy in Washington, going over the heads of the civil service, I think. Funnily enough, we've done something, this government's done something similar. Is Peter Mandelson a good choice to go to Washington?
I think he is. I think that on trade, and now they're going to move undoubtedly into tariffs, I think to have somebody who has had experience as a trade commissioner in the EU, besides being very intelligent, is a good choice. And he has obviously the confidence of Starmer. But I think that it's a sensible choice. But we shouldn't underestimate the difficulty of a single British voice. The Americans are making its policies under Trump. Whether we like it or not, we are going to see tariffs. Tariffs represents a challenge. And I think there's a role for Britain to be able to argue we should be treated in special circumstances. And that was one's view that Canada would be. But Canada's been brushed aside. Canada's been told straight out they're not going to get any special treatment. And I think it will be very difficult for Britain to get that. And I think that having a good, knowledgeable person about trade, and like Peter has, is good. Just to say on Peter Jay, I mean, one of the problems there was we had a new administration and a new president who nobody really knew, Carter. We had Brzezinski, who was hostile to Britain, and it was intellectual. And my job for Peter was to get to know Brzezinski. After 2 months, they were playing tennis together, and I thought to myself, he's done well.
I wish I could talk to you about that at much greater length, and maybe we'll get another opportunity another day. But that's been a lesson. Thank you very much, Lord Owen.
Pleasure.
In just a moment, we'll hear once again from our panel.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion has just come down. I think it was a monster just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks and taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
We're seeing an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change. We're being crushed.
Free from wherever you get your news. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first.
Hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Two clubs separated by a 3.5-mile stretch of urban North London. The North London derby occupies centre stage. And that's a beautiful finish. Circle, that's just stunning.
The North London derby, only on Peacock.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News. Let's speak one final time to our panel, Katy Balls, Andrew Fisher and Miranda Green. The thing that surprised me about what David Owen just said was how warm he was about Elon Musk's intervention in politics. And I was trying to work out during the break what that's all about. And it struck me that David Owen was active in a period of politics where press barons and media bosses like Beaverbrook and so on were expected to be in politics, as were big trade union leaders. Should we be not nervous about Elon Musk?
Maybe David Owen's not on Twitter and doesn't see what Elon Musk posts, but I think we should be quite nervous because at least, and I'm no fan of press barons generally, but at least they were kind of mediated through a kind of professional journalism. It wasn't their view unmitigated, which, as we've seen from Elon Musk, is quite random, not often based in fact, and quite bigoted at times as well, we've seen over the last couple of weeks. So I think there is an issue with this that we ought to be deeply concerned about. And I think actually the broadcast media and the press has got to be careful not to just repeat every controversial line that Elon Musk says like it's big news. It's somebody posting on Twitter who often doesn't have a handle on what he's talking about. He might be very good at what he does, but he's not an expert on various things going on in the UK, as he's proven over the last week. So I think we should be quite cautious.
Financial Times, guilty.
Guilty?
Of Elon Musk. Elevation.
So here's the thing. David Owen's positive reaction to Musk is to an idea of Musk, I would say, as the voice of business. Is Elon Musk the voice of business? There is clearly an important role for the voice of business. You've just, been speaking to the chambers of British Chambers of Commerce, but actually Musk is a kind of random ideologue with a lot of money. He's a plutocrat. That does bear comparison
that's not
to
new,
historical.
Is it? Rockefeller.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But also Citizen Kane. That can be a very, very malign influence. And I think, the problem with Musk is the sort of random nature of his interventions, and that they tilt very, very firmly right, and not just slightly right. So I agree with Andrew in this case. Actually, I think we have to be very careful.
This is one of the great things I love about this programme. This is the second time in 2 weeks that Citizen Kane, or indeed, in fact, Randolph Hearst, has shown up on the show. Hearst started wars and everything, but, he's part of this political scene. I wonder, though, as a serious point, though, Katy, has politics narrowed to the point where some of the kinds of forces and individuals who should play big roles. I'm not just talking about press barons, but I'm thinking about trade unions, no longer play quite the big role that they used to play in politics?
Well, I think the cast of characters is changing and the political landscape, but also the media landscape is changing.
Fast, very fast.
Yeah, I mean, big departure this week, Mick Lynch of the rail.
And also it means that I don't think you can ignore Elon Musk. And you can say you don't agree with what he has to say and things, but a combination of being the world's richest man, the technology entrepreneur who might mean that you have all these relevance in space, also in terms of the electric car transition, also having a close link to the president, the leader of the free world, and owning X, a huge platform, means that I think that it's almost a little bit living in the past to be, we're just going to ignore what this person says. Of course, you need to have some checks when you're working at how you report on these things. But to kind of just say, we're going to do our little, media thing over here, and he's got this audience here where a tweet gets 10 million interactions. But if you have a subscription, you can see what we've checked. It just doesn't quite work with the new world we're in. So I think that, trade unions have less power than they used to, partly because the Labour Party now looks to private donations as well as the trade union movement. Everything adapts, and we need to, and I think political leaders particularly need to work out in this new world, what do they do about these, tech billionaires? Mark Zuckerberg this week. Initially, when Trump came around the first time, the response was, let's have more censorship. Now it's, let's join the party. Get rid of these things.
Yeah, Zuckerberg this week has said, no more fact-checking.
Yeah,
let it all hang out. And as they say in China, let 100 flowers bloom.
But that's not censorship, though, is it? Freedom of speech isn't about the right to tell lies and make things up. It's about the right to express your opinion or the right to have a different view from the government. That's what freedom of speech means. It's not a right to make things up and lie and spread it around the world, funded by bots and goodness knows what. That is a real problem that I think we have to tackle as
It isn't illegal to be stupid.
No, but it's not
or
just
ill-informed.
stupid. I don't think Elon Musk is stupid. I mean, I'll give him that. But he clearly...
No, I wasn't talking about Musk. I was saying more generally. No, Musk is definitely not stupid.
Yeah.
But isn't the point, I mean, as Katy was saying, Musk is unignorable, and these people wield extraordinary power. But I think that the historical parallels don't work brilliantly because it's such a new terrain. So, you know, Beaverbrook or whatever, brought into number 10 for quiet chats. This is one sort of exertion of power, usually with a commercial agenda as well as a bit of a political agenda attached. But this is, you know, these are people who are self-invented in an era where things are moving so fast that we don't really even understand what it is they want. You know, I think it's going to be interesting to see how and when Musk actually splits from the Trump agenda, because we know that the Trump voter base desperately wants him to crack down on immigration and firm borders, and we know already that the technology backers of the Trump campaign want something completely different. They want loads more visas for people to employ. So there are going to be internal contradictions, but will it function like politics as we know it? No, it will not. It's going to be crazy.
Well, coming back to politics as we know it or we don't know it, one of the key things that's happened in the last 6 months has been the rise, or let's put it this way, the fall of the two-party duopoly and the rise of a splintered third party. And I didn't get the chance to we didn't have time to talk to David Owen, because last time third parties were powerful, he was essentially the leader of one, the SDP, which didn't quite make it. But Andrew, do you think that there's a potential for the end of that two-party duopoly? We hear that Mr. Corbyn may be part of a new lefty entity.
Look, I think the voters have told us that. I mean, look at the last election. Labour got a landslide with 33.7%. The Tories were down on 24%. I mean, they barely got, you know, just over 50% between the two of them. Clearly, it's breaking down, and they've only got themselves to blame for that, by the way. And you've seen some voters move to the right with reform. You've seen the Greens on 11% in a recent poll this week. So a huge kind of opening up of space around the edges here. And I think people do feel unrepresented. I mean, I mentioned earlier about where the public sits on public ownership. None of the major parties represent that.
Well,
all right, we are now going to talk more about that next week. Trump.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem. Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.